Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 254, The Echuca Blondin. Tommy Freeman was an Echuca-based paddle steamer captain. He was a born adventurer, a hard taskmaster, and an impatient man. He was said to have served the worst meals on all the paddle steamers on the Murray. His enemies called him Tear Arse Tommy. Tommy Freeman was born Thomas Henry Freeman on the 31st of March 1858 in Heathcote, Victoria, to Thomas Henry Freeman and Anna Maria Whittaker Trestrail. His parents were both born in England but married in Wales in August 1848, where Thomas was a mariner. He was a Cornishman from Redruth who held a deep sea master's certificate, and his father settled in the late 1850s in Moama. Thomas Henry Freeman, until his death in 1881, was the marine inspector for the shipping operations from Victorian and New South Wales ports. Thomas and Anna had two girls born in Wales before they emigrated to Australia in 1852. In total, they had 15 children, but 8 did not survive childhood. Tommy was the 7th child born. Thomas Sr. was only 53 when he died, and his youngest child, Jane, was only 10. On the 30th of May 1881, in the Riverine Herald, it outlined the death of the late Mr. Thomas Henry Freeman Sr. It said the funeral was largely attended yesterday afternoon. The remains were interred in the Moama Cemetery. Mr. Freeman was a very old resident of Echuca, having lived on the border for over a quarter of a century, and was known as one of the pioneers of the town. For many years past, he held the position of Marine Surveyor to the Underwriters Association and always discharged his onerous and multifarious duties in a faithful manner. In early youth, Mr. Freeman took a seafaring life and rose to the position of captain, which he held for years in the West Indian trade. He leaves a wife and family, the eldest son being now a master mariner on the Murray. Mr. Freeman had suffered for a long while from a bronchial affection, and for several weeks it was known the case was hopeless. After 5 weeks' confinement to his bed, he died on Saturday morning from inflammation of the lungs. During Saturday and yesterday, all the flags of the river shipping offices and mercantile establishments were flying half-mast as a mark of esteem towards the deceased. Mr., or Captain as he was also called, Freeman took a lively interest in the welfare of both Echuca and Moama, and at different times held large properties in both places. He was a staunch supporter of the Wesleyan Church and was a prominent member of the Loyal Echuca Lodge, and has performed in past years public services with credit. So Jane was only 10 when her father died and was 18 when their mother died in Echuca in 1889. Tommy was nicknamed Hooky as he had an accident with gunpowder when he was a boy and he lost several fingers off one hand. Tommy Freeman had another skill other than being a paddle steamer driver. Blondin was famous back in the day of walking on a tight wire rope. The real Blondin walked across Niagara Falls on a tight wire, and it fired the imagination of people, and he had many imitators. Tommy Freeman was one of them. He ran a wire across the Murray near the wharf with the wire fixed to 2 tall gum trees. He made the walk across the river with Billy Wallace on his shoulders and provided the laughter with some youthful fame. On the 25th of May 1876 in the Echuca Riverine Herald. Yesterday afternoon, the son of William Thomas Freeman of High Street, Echuca, a lad of between 13 and 14 years of age, self-taught, performed several very astonishing feats on the tightrope and wire. For some time past, several of the Echuca lads have been practising acrobatic and tightrope exercises. The boy Freeman has displayed a vast amount of ability on the tightrope, and yesterday he resolved upon giving the people of Echuca a treat. At 3 p.m, a stout rope was stretched across the Murray River of a distance of 150 yards, while on the bank of the river on the New South Wales side, a long piece of telegraph wire was stretched. Upon both the rope and wire, this self-taught boy performed feats that would have done credit to the renowned Blondin of Niagara reputation. Without the slightest trepidation, the lad mounted the rope on the Victorian side of the river, walked to the New South Wales side, returned, and when about midstream, laid down flat upon his back on the rope and kicked his feet about in the air in the most astonishing manner. After delighting the numerous concourse of people that had assembled to witness this Echuca prodigy, he mounted the wire and performed some very clever feats,
much to the admiration of the onlookers. We have not the slightest doubt that in a few years we shall hear of Master Freeman as the Echuca Blondin performing feats that will put the older Blondin somewhat in the shade. On the 1st of July 1876, in the Waganya News, the Echuca Blondin. Thomas Henry Freeman, the Echuca Blondin, performed on the tightropes on Friday before the largest audience seen for some time in Korowa or Waganya. The first part of the performance consisted of walking upon a rope across the Murray a few yards below the bridge. The lad is only 14 years of age and acquitted himself creditably, having walked the rope without the slightest appearance of fear or that he was performing anywhere else than upon solid earth. After completing this feat, he gave a more daring exhibition of his powers by walking upon a strained fencing wire suspended for this purpose. Upon this, indeed, his antics were extraordinary, for in addition to travelling the wire forwards, he completed the full length backwards while speaking with the crowd and gazing about in a most unconcerned manner. After this, he laid full length upon his frail support, sat down upon a chair, and did the various feats as gracefully as if upon a lounge in a drawing-room. Freeman, who we have said is about 14, learnt his art of tightrope walking with boys of a similar age in Echuca, merely for his sake of boyish exuberance, but he soon outstripped the others in feats of daring. He attempted his first perilous journey across the Murray on a telegraph wire a month or so since. He essays the most of the world-renowned Blondin's performances, including carrying a boy on the rope, but on the occasion of his performance on Friday last, no lads were found daring enough to ride upon his back. At Echuca, we are informed, he has performed the feat successfully at an elevation of 25 feet. On the 23rd of April 1877 in the Melbourne Argus from Echuca, the hospital fete took place today, and the Echuca Blondin performed. A month later, on the 22nd of May, in the Echuca Riverine Herald, notice, Queen's birthday, 24th of May, Thomas Freeman, the Echuca Blondin, will exhibit his wonderful feats on the tightrope at a height of 80 feet across the Murray River at the side of the new Murray Bridge, carrying a boy on his back. And on the 25th of May 1877 in the Melbourne Argus from Echuca, young Freeman, aged 19, the Echuca Blondin, crossed the Murray today on a rope about 80 foot high in the presence of 500 people. He also performed a variety of feats upon a wire rope. He's the son of Mr. Freeman, Inspector of Boats here. Apparently one of his feats was to wheel a small boy across the Murray in a wheelbarrow. On the 26th of May 1877 in the Echuca Riverine Herald, the Echuca Blondin. On Thursday afternoon, Thomas Freeman, whose rope-walking performances have gained for him the name of the Echuca Blondin, gave an exhibition of his skill by crossing the River Murray on a hempen line. The rope stretched between the railway bridge and the new Murray Bridge and was raised upon guys on either bank to a height of about 30 feet above the stream and drawn tight by a jenny. About 800 people assembled to witness the performance. Blondin successfully essayed the feat of crossing and recrossing the river upon the rope, starting from the Victorian side. He also lay upon his back upon the rope, stood up on one leg, and performed difficult feats both upon the rope and a wire line stretched at a height above the ground on this side of the Murray. Collection boxes were sent around amongst the crowd for voluntary contributions, which were freely given. And on the 19th of June 1877 in the Riverine Herald, the Australian Blondin. On Saturday, a juvenile, styling himself the Australian Blondin, essayed a public performance near the old Campaspe Bridge. He first mounted a thin wire stretched some feet from the ground and balanced himself cleverly upon it while he took off his coat and stepped through a small hoop. It was part of the program that the youth should cross the Campaspe on a rope, but this had not been drawn tight enough and this feat did not come off. The performance was of the itinerant character. The smallest donations were thankfully received by collectors who went amongst the crowd, which numbered 150. And on the 13th of October 1877 in the Echuca Riverine Herald, complimentary benefit. The committee of the Mechanics Institute have organised a complimentary benefit to Miss Cordelia Potter in return for the great assistance which she's rendered upon all occasions. The Echuca Blondin, Thomas Henry Freeman, will perform some of his wonderful feats on the slack wire. And 2 years after he was performing these feats as a 14-year-old, in 1879, he skippered the Riverina paddle steamer and then the Agnes for 4 years. Often to entertain passengers on his boats, he'd dive off the bow of the vessel, plunge deep underneath the paddle wheels and emerge in time to grab a rope hanging from the stern and clamber on board again. Tommy married Emma Mansfield Osborne on the 10th of July 1883. They were married at Emma's brother's residence at Sellex Hill in South Australia. Emma's father was Mr. William Osborne of Goolwa. They had 8 children, with 6 surviving childhood. His son George was his ship's mate. Tommy then skippered the Coorong from 1884 to 1886 and the Emma from 1885 to 1886. On the 16th of October 1886 in the Echuca Riverine Herald. A special meeting of the Echuca Steam Navigation Board was held yesterday afternoon at Customs House for the purpose of taking evidence in reference to a collision between the Edwards and the Emma steamers on the Darling River last July. The following evidence was taken. Thomas Henry Freeman, master of the steamer Emma, deposed, "We were proceeding down the Darling before breakfast on the 15th of July. We had a barge with us and we had to keep well up to the points to keep the barge from sagging into the bends. I was taking the point bend. The Edwards approached us, but I could not avoid her. Her captain could have avoided us if he'd taken prompt action. Both vessels were on the wrong side of the river. The barge struck us in the starboard paddle box and did about 10 pounds worth of damage. He was over 50 yards away when I first saw his steering pole. I blew my whistle as soon as I saw the steamer. If he'd stepped out of the wheelhouse and signalled to his barge, he would have avoided the accident. He seemed confused and never even whistled." Albert de Forest, mate on the steamer Emma, deposed that somewhere about the middle of July, we were coming down the Darling and heard the skipper blow the whistle, and on coming on deck I saw the Edwards coming upstream. Captain Freeman called out to the captain of the Edwards to take care what he was about, but that captain seemed to lose his self-possession. We managed to avoid the steamer but struck the barge. We could not have avoided the accident, but it was possible for the Edwards to do so. The accident happened just below Poman Station. The bends were thickly timbered and it would have been impossible to see a boat till it approached. Had the captain of the Edwards steered his boat and barge into the bank, we could have avoided the collision. We had to be on the wrong side of the river to prevent snagging on the barge. Captain Morton, the master of the steamer Edwards, said he held a captain's certificate. The accident occurred at 7 a.m. on the 26th of July, 10 or 12 miles from Menindee. We came up the starboard side of the river towards the point, that is on my right side. All of a sudden I saw a steamer coming around, keeping close into the point. I did not see it until it was close up and then whistled. The other steamer did not reply. It was coming upstream, whistled once and then eased the steamer and just stepped it for a moment. The Emma was shaping to keep clear of the bend. There was plenty of room in the bight. The other steamer had no room for the trees, but she might have kept her right side. My vessel was only going about half speed, and the other boat did not seem to take any notice of us. As she got clear of my vessel, she just grazed our barge. I could not say if it was before or abaft the beam. At any rate, it did not leave any marks. We did not run against the paddle box. I do not blame the captain of the other steamer for being on the wrong side when he came to the bend, but when he saw us, he might have sheered off. He could have easily have got on his right side if he liked. As far as he could see, there was no damage done to the paddle box. He had no mate on board, but the engineer was present. James Lang, the engineer on board the Edwards, said that early in the morning we were going up the Darling above Menindee. The river was not exactly straight, but a gentle curve, not a bend. It was quite correct for us to keep at the back of the point, that is, to keep on the starboard side. Therefore, we were on the right side. I happened to be looking forward when I saw the other vessel approaching and called out, "Here's the Emma coming down." The captain had seen the steamer at the same time and blew his whistle clearly and distinctly, but got no reply, an insult on the river. Emma was coming down on our side of the river. Those on board seemed confused, but held on and passed between us and the bank. There was at least 2/3 of the breadth of the river on the other side spare, so there was plenty of room on their own side. The river there is as wide as the Murray at the wharf, and we were close to the bank. We sheered off a little and then went straight on, never stopping. We saw the Emma sheer off our barge. We did not see the paddle box smashed. The men on board the Emma must have been asleep, or else the captain did not think he had time to cut across the river to his right side. After the collision, we kept on our course. We were going up the stream next to the bank. We were obliged to go there to avoid the current. There was plenty of room for the other boat. Captain Freeman sent us a letter to Wilcannia claiming damages. That was the first I knew about it. Captain Freeman was recalled and he said, "I swear that I blew my whistle as soon as I saw the Edwards. We were then just coming round the bend. I had to leave the wheel in order to do this and I blew a long blast. There was no reply from the other vessel. I hold a certificate from this board. The board was then called and said that they would adjourn. On the 19th of October 1886 in the Riverine Herald, a special meeting of the local Steam Navigation Board was held yesterday afternoon at the Custom House for the purpose of giving a decision in connection with the inquiry held concerning the collision between the steamers Emma and Edwards, which occurred on the 26th of July on the River Darling. The decision was, the board having heard the evidence of Thomas H. Freeman, master of the Emma steamer, Albert de Forest, mate of the Emma steamer, Charles Morton, master of the steamer Edwards, and James Lang, engineer of the steamer Edwards, is of opinion that the evidence is so conflicting it is impossible to say who is to blame for the collision, but consider that both masters were guilty of carelessness and are hereby cautioned to be more careful in the future, and the board is sorry to say that perjury has been committed by some of the witnesses. Tommy then skippered the Rothbury from 1890 to 1892 and the Success in 1889, 1891 to 1893, 1897 and 1902 to 1909, and also the Shannon from 1894 to 1899 and 1901 to 1904. He then ran the Kennelly from 1912 to 1916 and 1918. He was known on the river as Buck. In my article newsletter, I mentioned my delight at meeting Captain Freeman at Echuca. This was Buck Freeman, who, as an apprentice and later as mate to his father, Captain Thomas H. Freeman, was one of the riverboat families of the period. Captain Thomas Freeman wore a huge beard. He was a colourful character up and down most of the Australian rivers. In 1894 he purchased the Shannon, which was installed engines from a former harbour tug. This was a complicated engine, and whilst having the power to make the Shannon a fast paddle steamer, it was not completely satisfactory for cargo work. In 1874 at Barmah, Captain Freeman had built a barge called the Kennelly, which he converted to a paddle steamer in 1896 to replace the Shannon. He fitted her with the biggest locomotive engine he could find, profiting from his earlier experience with the Shannon, and soon the Kennelly was to earn the name the Greyhound of the Murray. She was an extremely powerful ship. With her draft of 2 foot 6 inches, it was not unusual for her, even with the barge in tow, to be driven over a 2 foot only sandbar. The Kennelly burnt more wood than most steamers, and Captain Freeman always carried a good supply of axes for his crew to cut firewood. A story is told too of an occasion up the Darling when Captain Freeman espied a man breakfasting on the riverbank one morning. He manoeuvred the Kennelly close inshore and in such a way that her waves washed out over the breakfaster, his breakfast and his camp. Kennelly was greeted with a burst of shotgun fire at the next bend. The Shannon went on the mainland rivers, and despite her 700 wool bale capacity under hatches alone, it did not please Captain Freeman as a cargo vessel, and he had her converted to a 3-deck passage steamer, which guise she proved popular for a time. This period unfortunately came to an end when she sank near Mildura. Having salvaged her, Captain Freeman sold her in favour of his converted barge Kennelly. In due course, Shannon was fitted with a different engine, and their owners sold her to H. Jones of Hobart of IXL fame. In Bass Strait she came close to foundering in a storm, but arrived eventually and safely in Hobart and joined other special cargo ferries on the Channel and East Coast, running this trade until the mid-1920s. Then IXL sold her to Victorian interests, but it was wrecked off King Island on the way over, and she never operated again on the mainland. On the 30th of May 1903 in the Echuca Riverine Herald, it says Thomas Henry Freeman deposed that he was the proprietor of 2 boats, the Success and the Shannon, and had the barges Nonpareil and Balubla. In 1908, Tommy Freeman had another barge built on the same lines at Kundrook by R.W. Beer. He named this barge TF and used it behind the Kennelly after it became a steamer in 1912. Freeman purchased the frames and the motion of locomotive engine number 57 from Newport Railway Workshops and installed it in the hull of the Kennelly. The engine was lowered into the hull by a wharf crane, a task that was only managed after some unauthorised works on the hydraulics. The engine was built in Newcastle, England in 1862 by Robert Stephenson, a pioneer of steam engines. It was an O-class, meaning it had 3 drive wheels on each side. Number 57 was the last of the original 12 engines supplied by Stephenson to be withdrawn from service. The Riverina Recorder on the 10th of July 1912 reported the conversion. Captain Freeman advises that he's putting a new steamer in the running this year, by which his clients will have the advantage of a quick transit afforded by one of the fastest vessels on the river. The Kennelly, as the new steamer has been christened, is fitted with a powerful loco boiler and is up to date in every respect. With a barge, she'll be able to shift 1,000 to 1,100 bales of wool each trip. She will be one of the first to move from the wharf at Echuca this season. And another report, Riverina Recorder on the 23rd of July 1913, noted a record trip. On Saturday week last, Captain Freeman's Kennelly left Echuca at 5 p.m. and, notwithstanding 15 stops en route, arrived at Balranald the following day at 8 p.m. The whole trip thus occupying only 51 hours. The last trip was perhaps an even greater achievement, for leaving Echuca on Saturday last at 10 p.m, the steamer arrived here at 4 a.m. yesterday morning after stopping 14 times and discharging 30 tonnes of cargo. The Kennelly is a record breaker, no doubt. In 1920, Thomas Freeman sold the Kennelly to William Tinks, master mariner of Morgan, South Australia. Thomas and Emma moved to the Melbourne suburb of Caulfield in 1924 and in 1928 moved to Sandringham. Tommy died in April 1939. The Echuca Riverine Herald had his obituary. Another of the old-time Murray River shipping owners and captains has passed away in the person of Captain Thomas Henry Freeman. His death took place in Melbourne, where he's been living in retirement for the past 20 years. He was in his 82nd year and born at Heathcote. He first became known to Echuca residents as the skipper of the steamer Agnes, and later during the boom days acquired 3 vessels, the Emma, the Shannon and the Kennelly. He was extremely popular both as a riverman and a good fellow, his cheery disposition earning him many friends. In addition to the ordinary river trade, he used to conduct trips on the Murray, which were greatly in vogue at the time. His retirement followed the disposal of his boats, but though living in the metropolis, he frequently visited Echuca to renew his fellowship with his many friends. He's survived by a widow and 6 children, 2 others having predeceased him. J.T. Freeman, chairman of the Echuca Water Trust, is a brother. 30th of May 1950 in the Echuca Riverine Herald. The new 4-tone chime which Echuca residents heard yesterday came from Evans Brothers sawmill, where it was recently installed. It was made by Freeman Brothers Foundry 40 years ago and was present at that establishment for many years, where it worked by compressed air. Another identical whistle was made for the late Captain Tommy Freeman for the paddle steamer Kennelly. After some years' service on that boat, it was bought by the Mildura packing shed, and for years now, because of its effective note, has been the public timepiece of Mildura. Judged by today's effort, the Evans Brothers whistle will probably do a similar job for Echuca. Just a little on his brother, JT, as JT has the link between the foundry that made the whistle for the Kennelly. John Trestrail Freeman was born on the 6th of May 1865 in Moama. He married Emily Myrtle Watts in 1889 and they had 2 sons. He died on the 6th of August 1949 in Echuca at the age of 84. His death was announced in the Echuca Riverine Herald. The esteem in which the late Mr. John T. Freeman that he was held by townspeople was evidenced yesterday with the attendance at the funeral, with one of the largest in Echuca for many years. And another article, Death of a Leading Townsman. Mr. J. T. Freeman passes. With the death yesterday of Mr. John T. Freeman, founder of Freeman Brothers Foundry, another link with Echuca's colourful past was broken. The late Mr. Freeman had been suffering for the past 5 years from diabetes. Active till the last, he died suddenly at 4:15 p.m. Thomas Henry Freeman, until his death in 1881, was the Marine Inspector for the shipping operations from Victorian and New South Wales ports. His sons and grandsons have added lustre to the name of Freeman along all the rivers. The late J.T. Freeman was the youngest son. His elder brother, Tommy Freeman, who died in 1938 at the age of 81, was acknowledged far and wide as one of the great Murray River skippers. Tommy Freeman's sons, William and George, carried on this tradition, being themselves prominent skippers of the 20th century. J.T. Freeman spent his first 7 years at Moama, his birthplace, and the remainder of his long life was spent in Echuca. Although he never took to the boats, his association with Whitehead's and Freeman's Brothers Foundries helped build and maintain them. J.T. Freeman had a great love for Echuca. In 1905, Sir George Ritchie and Mr. Leishman waited on him at Echuca and urged him to shift his foundry, in part or in full, to Mannum, South Australia, and also to become overseer to a foundry there. The late Mr. Freeman refused to do so. His engineering career began at Whitehead's Foundry, which until recently operated under the name of Kilgore and Richards. He rose to the position of foreman, but because of part-time employment due to a slack period, he went into partnership in 1889 to found Freeman and Olsen's Border Foundry. In 1900, the late Mr. Freeman became the sole owner, and in 1922, his sons were taken into partnership under the present name of the firm, Freeman Brothers. Right until the last, J.T. Freeman took a keen interest in the business. Ever since its foundation, the Border Foundry has played a big part in shipbuilding at Echuca, the premier shipbuilding centre in the Murray River network. It helped supply ironwork, it built paddle wheels, it assembled and fitted engines and carried out maintenance work on the boats. J.T. Freeman was a good citizen. He was an executive member of the School of Arts, which later developed into the Echuca Technical College. For 20 years, he was the government nominee on the Echuca Water and Sewerage Trust. He was a committee man, a foundation member and trustee of the Echuca Workingmen's Club, which he attended for the last time on Saturday night. He was an old taskmaster of No. 47 Millowa Lodge. In addition, he was prominent in sport and was captain for a number of years of the Echuca Rowing Club. He was an outstanding oarsman. His most publicised race was for £10 for a match against Tommy Carline. He rode on the Murray at Echuca and the race was over a mile upstream and ended sensationally. Carline won, but gross interference was alleged and the matter was taken to court, which awarded the race to J.T. Freeman. Tommy Carline, in a scull, which J.T. Freeman subsequently lent him, went on to win the Victorian Sculling Championship and later earned fame in world class as a sculler. J.T. Freeman's prowess as an oarsman is testified to an impressive array of trophies at his home. Tommy and Emma's children. The firstborn, Henry Osborne Freeman, was born on the 22nd of April 1884 at Goolwa, South Australia, and died in 1899 in Echuca, aged only 15. The Echuca Riverine Herald outlined his death. It is with great regret that we record the death of Henry Osborne Freeman, the eldest son of Captain Thomas Freeman, the well-known river steamer proprietor. The lad, who was 15, ate some unripe fruit on Saturday and was taken bad. Peritonitis set in, and despite the efforts of Dr. Smith and Erskine, he expired yesterday morning. The greatest sympathy is expressed on all sides for the bereaved family. And on the 19th of December 1899 in the Echuca Riverine Herald, Echuca Grammar School annual speech night. In the principal's speech it says, "With deep regret we refer to the death of Master Henry Osborne Freeman, who was a very promising boy. The high esteem in which he was held by his teachers and fellow students must be a sort of consolation to his parents in their bereavement." Daisy Evelyn Freeman, who was born in 1886 in Echuca. She married Arthur Hawke, known as Muddy, on the 17th of March 1909 in Mildura. Arthur was a blacksmith and they had 3 children. They lived in Mildura and then moved to Melbourne, and Daisy died on the 29th of March 1971 in Elstonwick at the age of 85. The third child was William Thomas Mansfield Freeman, known as Will, who was born in 1888 in Echuca. He married Mary Murray Flood Taylor in 1910. The Murray flooded in the month she was born, hence her middle names. They had 2 children, and in 1913 and 1914 they were living in Richmond, Victoria, where Will was a fruiterer. By 1916 he assisted his father in the paddle steamer trade. He skippered the Corowa in 1923 and the Ruby in 1923. Will was mentioned on the 6th of December 1923 in the Adelaide Register. In Renmark, the adjourned inquest as to the death of William Hall, who fell overboard the steamer Corowa on the 22nd of November, was resumed. William Thomas Mansfield Freeman was the master of the Corowa. In 1925, Will and Mary moved back to Melbourne, where Will worked as an engine driver. Then they moved to Gumbower in 1977. Will died on the 23rd of February 1978 at Gumbower at the age of 90. Their 4th child was George Eyre Freeman, who was born in 1890 in Echuca. George worked as a mate on his father's vessels. He served in World War I in the 7th Infantry Battalion and embarked on the 19th of October 1914 from Melbourne on the HMAT Hororata. He returned from war in 1918 and married Annie Josephine Broderick in 1919, and they had 2 daughters. On the 12th of May 1930, it's mentioned in the Melbourne Herald that the Union Club Echuca licence was transferred from George Eyre Freeman to John Broderick. On the 25th of September 1946, George became the licensee of the Post Office Hotel at Turrumbry. and his death was announced in the Echuca Riverine Herald on the 19th of November 1947. Mrs. Annie Josephine Freeman, who died suddenly at her home, the Post Office Hotel at Turrumbry, on Sunday evening, was the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. W.H. Broderick. Her parents were well known as licensees of the American Hotel Echuca for over 30 years. The late Mrs. Freeman received her early education at St Mary's and the latter at the Brigidine Convent. On leaving school, along with her sister Eileen, she assisted her parents in the American Hotel until she married George Eyre Freeman in 1919. They immediately took over the Pastoral Hotel at Mathara, New South Wales, but after a period of 5 years they disposed of the lease, then occupied the Union Club Hotel in Echuca for some years. After a period of rest, they took over the Railway Hotel at Wodonga, where they remained for 2 years, and on leaving that town they lived in retirement in Echuca. About 9 years ago, they bought the freehold of the Post Office Hotel at Turrumbry. She was of a kind and generous nature. She will be remembered by many of her numerous charitable acts. She took a keen interest in the welfare of soldiers, and during the recent war she sent parcels to soldiers both from Echuca and Turrumbry. The people in England were not forgotten by her, as she sent parcels regularly to be distributed there. She received many letters of thanks, one arriving the day before her death. The late Mrs. Freeman is survived by her husband and 2 daughters, Mrs. Reglar of Devonport, Tasmania, and Mrs. MacDonald of Echuca. A large number of sympathising relatives and friends attended the graveside, which testified the high esteem in which the late Mrs. Freeman was held. George was still at the hotel at Turrumbry in 1954, but by 1977 George was living in Echuca and working as an engineer. He died on the 1st of November 1979 in Echuca at the age of 89. The next child was Etty Beatrice Freeman, who was born on the 19th of May 1892 in Echuca. She married Stanley George Cutler in Mildura on the 19th of January 1920. Their marriage announcement stated Stanley George Cutler, late AIF, only son of the late G.H. Cutler of Mildura, to Etty Beatrice, second daughter of Captain and Mrs. T.H. Freeman of Echuca. They had 3 children, 2 of them survived infancy, and Stanley was a horticulturalist. Etty died on the 11th of June 1970 in Armidale, Victoria, aged 78. The next child was Harold Charles Freeman, known as Peter, who was born on the 27th of June 1894 in Echuca. He served in World War I in the 8th Australian Infantry Battalion. He enlisted on the 12th of November 1914 and returned to Australia on the 8th of April 1918. He married Ivy Jean Wilmot in Balranald in 1921 and they had 3 children. He then served in World War II in the 5th Battalion Volunteer Defence Corps. He enlisted on the 2nd of April 1942 and was discharged on the 31st of January 1944. They lived in St Kilda in 1949, where Harold was a postal employee. Ivy died in 1948 and Harold moved to Turrumbry, where he worked as a fisherman, and he died in Queensland on the 8th of July 1973 at the age of 79. The next child was Sarah Osborne Freeman, known as Sadie, and she was born on the 3rd of January 1897 in Goolwa, South Australia. On the 4th of April 1925, Sadie married Lewis Harold Bill in Malvern, Victoria. Lewis was the only son of Mr. and Mrs. L. Bill of Murrumbina. Lewis was an accountant and they had a son, Ian, in November 1925. They lived in Melbourne until 1937, when they moved to Gunbower, when Lewis was the manager of the National Bank. They then lived in Minyip, Victoria in 1942 and returned to Melbourne by 1949. Lewis died in 1951 and Sadie went on to marry Henry Beryl Effick in 1954, and Sadie died on the 25th of June 1984 at Sandringham, Victoria, aged 87. And their 9th child was Jean Orman Freeman, who was born on the 30th of October 1898 at Goolwa, South Australia. She died aged only 2 in 1900 in Echuca. And a little more on the Kennelly. In 1925, the vessel passed from William Tinks to Francis and Tinks Limited, and then very soon after the ownership transferred to the Ministry of Public Works, New South Wales. It then stayed with the New South Wales government as a workboat until W.G. Collins purchased it in 1934. Collins married in 1938 and the couple lived on board the Kennelly for a number of years. By 1942, the Kennelly was back at Echuca and being used as a barge behind the Hero, working for the New South Wales Forest Department to carry firewood to the Victorian Railways. The Chislett brothers purchased the Kennelly as a barge to carry the logs back to Boundary Bend, and then it was left tied to the landing at Boundary Bend where it eventually sank. The Rivers and Riverboat Historical and Preservation Society entered into a joint venture agreement with the Chislett families to raise and restore the Kennelly to an operating paddle steamer. On the 8th of February 1999, the Kennelly was raised to the surface and remained afloat, sheeted with a large bunker tarp around the hull to prevent any major leaks. Everyone was amazed at the good condition of the timber and steel in the hull. Much mud was removed prior to the refloat. By the 15th of February, all the mud had been removed and the Kennelly was floating on a 150mm draft. It then remained afloat and stabilised at Robinvale until mid-2010, when the ownership was transferred to the Mid-Murray Council and the Morgan Historical Society. The Riverboat Society at Mildura tendered the job to take the Kennelly from Robinvale to Berry. The Impulse made its way up to Robinvale, where Morgan enthusiasts, with the aid of the Friends of Kennelly, prepared the Kennelly for the tow. In 2011, it was slipped at Berry, where repairs and hull replanking were done. It was then refloated and moved to Morgan, and it gradually underwent a full restoration back to its original condition as a paddle steamer, and from 2013 was powered by Marshall & Sons. In 2017, it says, restoring greyhound of South Australia's River Murray, the paddle steamer Kennelly. One of Australia's fastest river paddle steamers is being restored to her former glory by volunteers. The Kennelly was dubbed the Greyhound of the Murray during the steam era of the early 19th century after its colourful captain Thomas Freeman fitted it with a powerful train engine. In those days, the fastest boat to the job got the job, so he got an old railway boiler and steam engine from the Victorian Railways and put it in the Kennelly. It made a very fast boat, and there are stories of people in little fishing skips being tipped out as the boat went flying past on its way to another job. The partially rebuilt steamer is the pride of the South Australian river port of Morgan, which once connected upstream river trade with a railway line to Adelaide. The hull is now complete. The boiler and engine should be going in sometime in the next 6 months. Then we need to put a superstructure on it and it should be ready to go. The Kennelly should be back under steam by next year and fully rebuilt by 2021, but it will be unlikely to reach the speeds attained under Captain Freeman. And the latest says that it was aimed to be ready to be on the river in 2025. However, we're at the start of 2026 now, so hopefully it is imminent that the Kennelly is back on the river. In this day and age of insurance, we're not allowed to have paddle steamer races, he said. One such race in 1913 saw the PS Kennelly convincingly beat its rival PS Arbuthnot. After a desperate race of 18 miles, the engineer of the Kennelly, who'd been nursing a few notches up his sleeve, gave her full speed, and the much talked of Arbuthnot met her Waterloo, he said. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Tommy Freeman, not only a riverboat captain, but a very good tightrope walker by the sounds of it.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.